Hey, broken salespeople. Welcome to the workshop. My name is Red Staffstrom, and we are here to help you fix your broken sales skills. Doing something a little bit different today. Today with me, I have Michael F. Schein. He is an expert who is going to take apart my business as opposed to me taking apart his. He is the author of the Hype Handbook, 12 Indispensable Secrets from the World's Greatest Propagandists, Self-Promoters, Cult Leaders, Mischief Makers, and Boundary Breakers. It's an amazing book. He actually let me read an advanced copy. Tons of great material on how to set yourself apart in business, and that is coming out tomorrow. So make sure you pre-order that. But right now, it's so great. It's great having you on.
It's really good to be here, Red. We've been talking about this for a little bit. This is so much fun.
Yeah, so I've loved in your book, and I really want you to kind of start taking apart my business. But the thing I loved is how to do the abnormal activities that so many other people, the unprofessional way of doing things that create the professional results you want. You're like, if go into some of your background, particularly the Gary Vaynerchuk stuff, I think would be a good introduction.
Well, yeah. So I have what I guess most people would consider a marketing agency, but I don't like to talk about marketing. I worked at a corporate job for a long time, but before that, I played in punk bands and things of that nature. Very glammy kind of punk bands. And we certainly didn't become rock stars, or else I probably wouldn't be talking to you right now, as much as I love you, Red.
No, I
However,
completely understand. I am not a groupie by any stretch of the imagination. You could find better looking groupies than me.
yeah. However, we did better than we probably should have, considering my lack of singing ability and various things. So, there was this club, Arlene's Grocery in New York City, which is a pretty famous club, small but really well known. The Strokes got their start there, and we used to sell it out all the time. We had a residency there, so we would do things like, I we talked our way on to Showtime at the Apollo, knowing full well that we would get booed off. And I used to dress like a nun and walk around the Lower East Side, and we got on the cover of New York Press as a result of that. So we would do things like that. And so when I worked the better part of a decade at a corporate job, did pretty well there, but by the end, I was really, I felt like I lost my soul a little bit. So I left, and I was really always a writer at heart. Even in the band, I wrote songs more than the playing being my thing. And yeah, I just figured there was this opportunity at the time to write what they call demand generation copywriting. So lead generation, words, white papers, case studies, things like that. And I figured, because I wrote well and I'd always been told that I was a good writer, that, I'd get business and people would see how well I wrote and I would make a living that way. And, that did not happen. I mean, I got a few deals, but for the most part, I just burned through my savings and was on the verge of bankruptcy. um, However,
It's fun to laugh about that kind of
yeah,
thing now. Like how many
yeah,
times I hear those stories and how they turn around. It's never fun in the moment, but it's always good to hear that you bounce back.
it was hard. I mean, I had an infant. I mean, I picked the worst possible time to do this thing. Uh, I remember writing copy with my little girl on my chest, like almost waking up to cry for 3 hours. So that was crazy. But what I ended up doing, though, is I started to think, like, I'm trying to pretend that I'm this salesperson slash marketer, and let's be frank, I suck. I am not good at this thing called marketing. No one is finding out about me, and I'm quite bad at sales. The few people who did find out about me, aren't you glad you had me on a show called, Broken
Broken
Sales? I
salespeople,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, we're that's what I was, a broken salesperson.
Yeah.
Never really got fixed in the first place. However, however, I wasn't very good at any of that. I wouldn't close deals when I did get the opportunities. But I said, and I read every sales and marketing book, and they did nothing for me whatsoever. And like at my lowest of desperation, I remember thinking, I used to be pretty good at I don't know if you call it marketing. We never thought of it as marketing. We just thought of it as hyping ourselves up. And I was really good at that. And I was like, well, why don't I got nothing to lose right now. Why don't I try to hype up my business instead of marketing it? Right. So there's one principle, as you said, the book has 12 strategies that these unconventional type people, whether they're early rock managers or cult leaders or propaganda artists, use often to do evil in the world. But the same strategies can be done for good, because I never really wanted to hurt anybody. But one of the things I noticed is these kind of unconventional people, they always pick fights. They always create an us versus them dynamic. People are attracted to bold stands and argumentation almost. And so there was a guy out there that I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, named Gary Vaynerchuk. He was this internet guru, still is, really good at a lot of things, but he would constantly scream at his adoring young fans that they need to hustle, 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 and sit on the toilet. And even when you're on the toilet at 3 a.m, tweet from the toilet, and that's the only way you can make it. And I just thought this was kind of ridiculous. I thought it was really good for Gary. He seemed to be getting richer and richer, but I didn't really think it was good for these youngsters. And we can talk about why he has that message. That in itself is a hype strategy.
Yeah, that was the 12th principle, to master the effortless doing, is like, just make it seem like you're always on. You never need a break. Yeah,
fetishize hard work, and there are reasons that work, and master effortless doing. Yeah. So, however, long story medium, I wrote an article called "Why Gary Vaynerchuk is Flat Out Wrong," where I basically called him out for this, and I said that a better thing to do is to have a systematic approach to social media. I was a nobody, as I just told you. He was not, and he made a video calling me out by name about how I didn't know what I was talking about, and he was getting very agitated, much more than he should have from a guy like me. And his fans started lambasting me by name all over the internet. And it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I mean, it launched my career. All of these people who I guess had been thinking similarly to me sort of joined my side in the battle. And I don't know, I gained a lot of followers, and it started a chain of events that eventually led to me owning say a marketing agency, a hype agency, whatever you want to call it. So that was my origin story.
So I love the fact that you don't call it a marketing agency, that you do call it a hype agency. Like, you hate the idea of actual marketing.
I don't hate it, but I don't know what it means. I mean, it's Ryan Holiday, who is a very sophisticated marketer and writer. He says that marketing is just anything that gets you to keep or retain customers, and I think that's a good definition. But you just see a lot of like marketers. Are they web designers? Are they advertising agencies? Are they social media doers? So to me, hype, I define it, even though it has a negative connotation, I just find it very neutrally. It just means any set of activities or that you do that gets people very emotional for your purposes, that you can direct them in a certain way, and that can be for something awesome or something not so good.
So it's more about the actual creating the visibility, and then let the ability afterwards like speak for itself.
The visibility and the emotion, right? I mean, you can take out a massive ad campaign and become very visible. I remember there was a woman in LA who had a very wealthy husband, and she decided she wanted to get famous. I forget what this person's name was, and she just bought millions of dollars worth of billboards. So she had a lot of visibility.
Yeah.
But I still don't remember her name. And she couldn't direct them to do anything on her behalf. They just knew who she was. So there's a component of getting them emotional and swept away as well, and then directing them to whatever you want them to do.
My thought is the Kardashians right now. Tons of visibility.
Yeah.
But other than Kylie, they really aren't selling much of anything.
I mean, yeah, maybe. I mean, they were selling a lot of ad space on their show.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're pretty good hype artists. I don't know what else. Yeah.
But it's not like they sell, like, other than Kylie's product with the lip gloss and everything else.
Yeah, no.
It's not like Kim Kardashian is creating a clothing line to the same degree that everybody else is.
Not that I know of, anyway.
And no. She's not I'm not her target audience by
You're not. Description. No, you're not. I mean, I don't, I think, whatever, I can sit and, again, when I look at these examples, it's not my place to say whether the content of what they're selling is good or bad. I can say that, but it's almost irrelevant. It's what mechanisms did they use to get large numbers of people swept up in this thing, because you can then repurpose those same mechanisms to sell good stuff. So if you think that the what is there, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, if you think that show is mental trash and garbage and rots the brains of the youth, which whatever, it's not my thing, but I don't know. But let's say you really believe that. Well, can you still use their packaging tactics to sell educational materials? Maybe.
Absolutely.
You should explore that.
Yeah, the methodology, the steps, the IKEA steps in order to do it.
Right.
Once you build the table, whatever you put on there is up to you.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start kind of taking things apart now. Let's
Sure.
start like ripping off. So my original thought process. So as you know, as we've talked about a few times, I am pretty far against a lot of the old school sales tactics.
Yes. Yeah.
That you hear. My thought process originally was Grant Cardone, the same way you went after Gary Vee, because he is, I think you said it, the cigar chomping, backroom suit wearing, like the old school kind of, like he, I think, is a foil for what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Plain t-shirt in a workshop basement as opposed to glorifying. What methodologies would you suggest kind of using to go after him?
Well, I don't want to start there with all.
Okay, so where would you normally start?
Yeah, where I would normally start. So I made the point that hype is about getting people emotional using these strategies that we've discussed of some of these unconventional figures, but doing it in service of a goal, doing it in service of getting people to take actions that benefit you and your cause in some way. And that can be furthering the cause of civil rights. It could be selling $1 million worth of merchandise. It could be getting 1 million listeners for your podcast. So here's where I would start. If you and I borrowed this question from a guy named Dan Sullivan, but it works really well. If you and I were having a conversation like this a year from now, and I said, and you said to me, Mike, hopefully we'd be in person because the COVID would be
yeah, that would be a nice change of pace compared to us being in lockdown.
So we have some beers in front of us or whatever, you would pick your poison. And we're talking and I say, and you say, Mike, gosh, the last year has been fantastic. As bad as 2020 was, this year's been great, especially professionally, but even personally, because they're connected. What a year. For you to be able to say that to me, paint a picture of that year. What has to have happened for you to be able to make that claim?
So at that point, what I really want to do is help the message. Like, I believe myself to be very purpose driven. The analogy that I often use is Daniel Pink's autonomy, mastery, purpose. I tend to be very freedom, like autonomy focused, very purpose driven. So I want to be able to maybe not live the full-blown Tim Ferriss lifestyle, but be in that direction. Like not quite the full 4-hour work week, because I'd go mad with that much free time.
Okay.
But I want to be doing something that actually helps people get better at their jobs. I think my position is, my skill set is I can help people get closer to mastery. And that's my purpose, is I can help people with that aspect better than most other people can. So if a year goes by and I'm where I want to be, I'm picking my own schedule at that point. I'm helping people grow their business, change their own lives. Those are really the two big tent poles for what I want. Money, obviously a part of it, but that comes with like the other two. The money is just the price tag to buy those two things.
But let's get more specific. That's a good start. Okay. But helping people, but aren't you doing that now?
I am
helping. So how many people,
okay.
To what degree, what is it? I mean, really be show, don't tell, you know what I mean? Like, tell me what that really looks like.
So at that point, what I'd really want to have is 10,000 at least followers.
Okay, great. 10,000 followers. Now, what is a follower?
Somebody who believes in the message, believes in my methodology of doing sales. Somebody who believes not in the old school objection handling, like always be closing Glenn Ross toxicity.
Yeah.
People who believe that in order to sell, you need to provide a solution, not just collect money. It needs to be both. Those are the
Okay,
people who I really
so
want.
those are the kinds of people, but what does a follower look like? Is it someone who sees your ad pop up and clicks it once? Is it someone on your mailing list? Like, it's concrete.
No, I do want people who like active listeners on the podcast. People
Okay,
who
so
have
it's
me in.
listeners. It's
Yeah,
regular. So the podcast is at the hub of everything.
that's where the way I'm kind of building things now. Like email list will be part of it, social media will be a part of it, but the podcast is going to be where
Okay.
I believe the main spoke in the wheel.
Now, 10,000 regular listeners, how does that turn into the fuel you need to make? I mean, money is fuel, unless you're
Absolutely.
just obsessed with money, but otherwise money is fuel.
Yes.
And that gives you the ability to pick your schedule, because I'm assuming you need to, there are things you got to buy all those tools that I see behind you, right?
Yes.
So how do those people turn into that fuel?
So I have a book, 3/4 written at this point. That's going to be one step. That's going to be the beginning of the sales funnel, so to speak. Also want to turn that and leverage it into public speaking. I don't know if I want to go the coaching route, but it's something that I can potentially do if that's a direction I need to. But those are step one, I think, is the book, and then that can turn into public speaking and paid public speaking, and then it can turn into coaching, media products, training courses, things along those lines.
And what do the 10,000 listeners, how do they turn into speaking gigs and book success?
That's them buying the book and then passing it along, and then getting the wheels gripping from that point and getting
So
that.
you want
share.
10,000 book buyers?
Eventually, probably not 10,000 book buyers, 2,000 I'd be happy with.
And how does that turn? How do you then see what I'm doing here, Red, is that people say these kind of things. Like I'll talk to people who have businesses that aren't fully developed, and I know yours is more developed, but people have, and they'll say, I'm going to get 1 million followers to my website a month, and that'll turn into a business. And I'll say, well, what's your business model? What do you mean they'll turn into business? You're going to advertise to them? Like, well, what are you selling them? Well, so I'm trying to get you to give me that bridge, because it's nice to do the hype, but what are we hyping?
Yes.
So so you sell 2,000 books. That's nice. If you get it published, that's not a lot of books, because you're getting $2 a book if you're lucky. And if it's self-published, that's still not a ton of money. So what are you expecting? One of those people runs a conference? Are you going to write a letter to the conferences saying I sold a lot of books? Like, I guess I don't see the connection. Now, what I want to say is I'm being contrarian on purpose. This is what I always do.
And I appreciate that, because there's not, the whole point of this is actually showing the steps. And if I'm skipping ahead because that's the way my mind works,
it's not your mind. Everyone does this.
Yes.
Like when we do this process, it's just funny. And I would do it if you did it to me. It's just, it's impossible. We don't get clarity around our own thoughts until someone takes us through a process like this. And I know this doesn't feel like the fun, saucy hype stuff, but this is the foundation, because people don't think about this stuff.
And that's why I do this podcast in a workshop, because the unsexy stuff is the stuff that matters.
Right. Which is fun, because normally on the podcast, I'm talking about all the con artists and propaganda artists, but that's not what this is.
No.
This is where it happens.
So my methodology would be along the lines of the Dream 50, Dream 100, really focusing and selling on those people, creating that list of the people that I need to be friends with, the people I need to associate with, people who run conferences, people who run major companies who would want to hire a public speaker. But that's the list that I would really be cultivating and selling to, is that Dream 100 list.
Which is smart, but what's the 10,000 followers for?
The credibility, mostly.
All right. So, okay.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing is you're going to simultaneously build really strong relationships with a dream list, 100 people who you're nurturing. It's almost like what I call a secret society. We talk about that in the book, this hardcore under the surface network of people that you can call on for help and favors and sales without stressing yourself too much, because they're almost like friends. But then on the surface, you need to be able to come to them and say, listen, man, there's some real momentum going on here. And that's what I call manufacturing momentum. And what I mean by that is if you can get 12,000 followers, it's not the 12,000 followers that matter. That's not enough to do much. It's that, hey guys, if I can do 10,000, then I can do 1,000,000. It's kind of like Motley Crue used to sell out a place on the Sunset Strip every Wednesday night, and there'd be a line around the block, and they got signed. Why did they get signed? For those 600 fans? Of course not. But if you can sell out a place and have a line around the back on a Wednesday, imagine what you can do with marketing dollars. And I call it marketing there because that was in an era where it was MTV, point of purchase. I mean, hardcore marketing stuff that mattered back then.
Yeah. Now the difference is the musicians now build their own following, and now they're getting begged to come on rather than like NBC is begging Justin Bieber to come on rather than Justin Bieber begging to come on NBC. It's the other way
at the same time, people don't buy records, so the whole thing is screwed up. It's a whole different dynamic. But my point is that principle that it's beyond just a credibility signifier. It's like that's a case study. It's just common sense. If you can do that on your own, imagine what you can do with a machine behind you. Absolutely. If you're doing a talk at IBM, if you can get 10,000 people excited, imagine what you can do for IBM's corporate audience. That's exactly
calculus. Where I was. It's about having people who are energetic, who enjoy the language that I use, the purpose behind what I do. And then it will how that reverberates within an audience.
That's like a 100%. Live audience. Yeah. So no, I get that. So with that in mind, what are the roadblocks? What are the things standing in the way of you getting there? And I'm sure this is uncomfortable for you to talk about because we have to talk about our weaknesses, but otherwise you'd be there already. So if what are those boulders in the road that if you could get rid of them, you'd be where you wanted to be?
So I have to get better at I have to get better at social media. Social media is not something that's my natural strength. I'm a natural introvert, and just hopping on and talking about my day is not the way I'm normally built.
Do you have, is that really, I'm just going to challenge that. Is that absolutely essential to getting 10,000 listeners to your show? Maybe it is. I don't know. I've seen people do it without it.
Essential, probably not, but I think it might be the fastest way.
All right, so you're saying that you don't feel comfortable with social media and you have no other mechanism to substitute it. Yeah, that you can think of.
The analysis the metaphor that I always use for social media is I imagine it like the bar. If everybody is going to the same bar, every potential customer I could want is going to the same bar every night for an hour, I have to be at that bar and passing out business cards.
Okay.
Now, I don't have to be at every bar, but I have to be at least one if that's where all my ideal customers are.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, I agree with you. So there's that. What else? Let's go all out with the negativity here.
Yeah. From that one, I'm still learning cleaning up the image, cleaning up the podcast, the editing. It's a lot of the tech issues. I'm still learning. I know I don't relate to, and I don't come across as the normal salesy person. That's partially on purpose, but I know it's also a weakness for some people. People don't see.
Is it why? Why is it a weakness?
Because I'm never instantly recognized. It's not like I'm a Dan Locke, for instance.
Well, that's good because I don't know who that is. So
okay, so he is.
He's not that recognized.
I don't know if he's full-blown Chinese or what, but he is Dan Lok.
Yeah.
He's always wearing the double-breasted suit. Okay. He has all these videos shot of him in the back of limousines on private jets. That kind of salesperson.
However, let's talk about that for a minute because you hit upon this early. I don't want you to lose your soul here, right? Because Gary Vaynerchuk, for all his faults, the first thing he ever did provided true Lloyd value. It was Wine Library and Wine Library TV, which I will say to this day is fantastic. I mean, this is a guy who sold wine for his father's liquor store, took $1 million business and turned it into a $50 million business. And the way he did that is he had a show where he would talk about wine, and he's this like Long Island bro, Belarusian immigrant with this voice. I mean, I don't know, that does not sound like a sommelier. Let's just say that he wears
No, yeah, like a little bit nasally, like a little combative, like a little like Napoleon syndrome kind of voice that he has.
but also it's this very Long Island thing too. And he wears hoodies, but they're not like cool, expensive like Facebook hoodies that they have like the jets, and he's like always unshaven, not like you, like where you have a cultivated beard. He just like forgot to shave. And he would compare wine to like Cinnamon Toast Crunch and Skittles. And this was so brilliant because it's wine, it's not beer. I mean, the typical wine sommelier is wearing a suit and has that little medallion around their neck, and it's all fancy and slow jazz. And he was like, no way, man. I'm going to gamble that there's an audience out there who doesn't get that. And I don't know, you can just sort of accidentally be read, and as I got to really clean myself up, or you can kind of. So here's a hype thing. So like Andy Warhol, right, was an awesome artist from a young age, but that's like all he had going for him. He was pathologically shy, which is really bad if you're trying to make it in art, because there's a lot of politics and schmoozing and that kind of thing. He was gay and also very effeminate at a time where first of all, being gay was illegal, and abstract expressionism was like these really manly men. Like if you watch Jackson Pollock, it was this very like Ernest Hemingway-ish kind of vibe that was going on in art. He balded at a very early age. He had acne, and he was very pale skinned, all kinds of stuff. But what did he do? He took all of his quote unquote weaknesses and turned them into strengths that people are still emulating. So he was balding. So what did he do? He put a overly obvious silver wig on his head. You know what I mean? That everyone knew was a wig. That is like to this day his signature like thing. He was shy, so he turned that into a thing. I mean, people would say, go try to impress him and say a whole thing, and he would say, oh gee, and people would say, what did he mean? What did he do? So he would have these pithy phrases. He would say one sentence to say what people would normally say in a paragraph, and no one really knew what he meant, and they would read all this stuff into it. He was pale skinned, so he made that into like a look. He's like the progenitor of goth. He wore he was very skinny. Oh, and the effeminate thing. I mean, he basically, the whole scene that became glam rock came from him. The Velvet Underground, Bowie paid homage. So like everything that like he shouldn't have been, he turned into a strength.
Yeah. And that's what I'm hoping to do. But I know while establishing initial credibility can be an obstacle.
Well, let's see. Okay. So there's that. What else? What else is,
cash flow. That's something. I've got a 6-month-old. She's not cheap.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, things like that. Time constraints are a big one for me right now, because I'm still working a full-time job while doing this, while having a 6-month-old.
And you want to do this full time. You want this thing to be your gig. Yeah.
Eventually, yes. I figure it's going to take a year to 18 months, but that's the eventual.
Yeah, of course. All right. And then I guess I would just say, before we move on to the like sort of hype exercises, what are the things that you're just uniquely good at that you can double down? Assets. I don't mean money, but like it could be money, but you just said cash flow is a problem. But like personal, professional assets because I always believe the first thing you should do when you're hyping up anything, when you're marketing, even when you're selling, is start with what you've already got.
Yes.
So what do you got?
So my biggest strength in my mind is I think different than a lot of other salespeople. One, I'm a full-blown introvert. Most salespeople aren't. So I've had to break down and study human interaction to a way that most other people haven't.
Okay.
So I never had that naturally charismatic personality. So I understand what I have to do a lot better because it never became natural to me.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's, and think about what you just said. I use that, right? Think about my little origin story, which I've told a million times. And this sounds calculated, and it is,
Mhm,
but at the same time, it wasn't the first 5 times I told it.
mhm.
I am a naturally bad marketer and salesperson.
Yeah.
And that's true.
Yeah.
I am not one of these people. Some people don't care what business they're in because all they care about is selling. They'll sell aluminum siding because the game is what's fun to them. I'm not that guy. Like I
No.
have to be in media. I'm not interested in sales for its own sake, but I am interested in psychology. So I use that all the time. I'm always talking about how I sucked, and I had to almost scientifically reverse engineer what these naturals did, and I think that appeals to a lot of people because a lot of people are like, I'd start a business, but I'm so bad at sales and marketing.
And my origin story is all about me not being able to sell security systems and having a mental breakdown
I mean, exactly.
because it
So
was
yeah,
something that I wasn't capable of doing, even though I thought I knew everything about
right,
sales at that point.
right.
Um, so now I'm able to sell something and work on something that I do believe in, that it's not about the widget anymore. The widget doesn't matter. It's about being able to tell people how to sell what they are passionate about. My strength more than anything else is that I can take apart ideas and put them back together.
Like you're obviously a builder too. So
Hmm.
and you've used ideas of table, you've said IKEA.
Yeah.
Let's put a check mark on that because that idea of building and disassembling and rebuilding, and the fact that you do that tangibly in life, I don't know. There's something to
Yeah.
that. So we talked about Grant Cardone, but
Hmm.
he's a weaver of fantasies. Many of them truly just fantasies, whereas you're a builder
Yeah.
and
No,
a deconstructor. Yeah.
and I can see the way the parts intertwine a lot better than most people can. That's where I
And I think
really
that'll
see my
appeal to a
strength.
lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not this grandiose, again, fantasy of building something unattainable. It's not like, oh well, one day you'll be a millionaire. It's no, Allen wrench twist.
So with that in mind, let's move over to some of the hypier stuff because I think this is a good segue. And all of this stuff was vital for it
Hmm.
because it's about going to an actual place, not just doing it for the sake of it. We're not trying to cause a riot just to see the destruction, right? So
That's not a very punk rock statement. You've aged.
no, yeah, exactly. I have certainly aged, and
Yes.
I don't know if I was ever punk rock. All my heroes were always rebels, but I was kind of a goody two shoes, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah.
So what is let's before we get into the person Grant Cardone, because I think that's almost less important.
Hmm.
What is a point of view in your space, in your corner of the universe, that it's almost gospel is or like a trend is the way things are done.
Hmm.
People will talk about it's the way things are, and you hate it. You're against it. Let me give you an example before you talk.
Hmm.
I didn't start with Gary Vaynerchuk.
Hmm.
I started with the idea of hustle. My whole thing with writing was I always used templates and blueprints. So when I was a copywriter, the thing I was selling was that there was a structured process that got brains to take certain actions. And I got that process and I used blueprints to do it. And it also made me faster. And sometimes I would even sell packages where I taught their people. Magento was a client and I created a templated system for their case studies. So, which they used to market a lot of their stuff and sell a lot of their stuff. So I believe that structures and systems and efficiency in writing were important and in marketing. And I hated the idea that in order to succeed in digital content, I'm getting a little in the weeds to my industry, but in order to succeed in digital content, you had to hustle, hustle, work, work, hustle, hustle, work, work. That annoyed me. And so Gary was just one of many people talking about it, but he had the biggest mouth and was the most visible. So it was an article I could write, but it was the concept that I started with because otherwise you're just a troll. You're just picking fights with people. That's not the goal.
Absolutely.
So my question to you is, what's a point of view in your corner of the world, maybe the sales coaching world, we can say, that everyone is saying, and you just can't stand it. It just annoys you. It's wrong. You would go on a soapbox to talk about how wrong it was.
So the one that drives me the most nuts, and I've got a handful of these in sales.
Yeah, let's do it. Give me a couple.
So closing statements, I hate. You cannot manipulate your way into a relationship.
Explain that more deeply, because I know your fans know these terms, but let's make it human. What is a closing statement?
So a closing statement is like a standing room only close. We only have 4 left. We only have 3 left. We're going to run out by Friday.
And you think those are bad?
Yes, I believe they're.
Now, what I would say to you is scarcity is a real thing, right?
Absolutely.
Like people do get jacked up when they think something's going away and buy. So should you not use scarcity? Are you against the concept of scarcity?
If it's real, you should.
Okay, so you're saying using fake scarcity for the sake of scarcity,
yes,
in a close,
absolutely
is wrong.
Lying to clients in general.
Okay, but that's lying. That's not a controversial statement, but you're actually saying don't create scarcity where there's none.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do you feel that way?
Because I believe it to be manipulative.
It is manipulative, but shouldn't you then just create an environment where it's scarce? Always?
Why would, like?
Because people buy more when things are scarce.
Yeah.
I'm being a thorn in your side on purpose, but yeah.
And I know, and I like the fact you're
because you have to speak to it. If you're going to take a bold stand, you got to have someone's going to throw Robert Cialdini at your face, and you're not going to be able to defend yourself. You know, the Influence book, yes. Right?
And I've read both Influence and
right. So go to the mat with me.
So you absolutely can. I just don't believe it to be ethical.
It may not be. It may not be ethical, but then you need. What I would do if scarcity works, I would say, well, closing statements are important. Sell products that have scarcity built in always, because it works. So if I'm selling a workshop, it needs to have 20 people, because that's the most I can do to have a successful workshop. If you're saying my fidget spinners, there won't be any left by Tuesday, I mean, I think you sound like an idiot, because I think everyone knows that you can make more fidget spinners.
Absolutely. So so
what are people saying that you would fight against? They're saying you should always have a scarcity-based closing statement.
Well, the closing statement that I always use is just low pressure, but I'm against the idea of kettling is the term.
What is kettling? I don't know that.
It's actually a police tactic. It's a term I learned during the riots in the summer.
Oh, is that where they try to squeeze everyone into the middle?
Everybody in. When you start doing that, once you start pressuring customers in that way, I'm not saying it's ineffective, but it forces them to fight back. By creating things like scarcity, by creating false choices, by doing all these things, what you're actually doing is creating a fight, flight, freeze response in the customer.
So how about this? Something that I like to do is think by talking. So what I would say to you, you brought up Grant Cardone.
Yes.
And I don't know Grant Cardone. I can't say if he's a good or bad person. Mm-hmm. From what I've seen, though, the amount of money that he makes and fans that he has based on the actual value he delivers seems to be a very low ratio. I still don't know. I mean, he sells just sort of like personal betterment, mm-hmm. Vague kind of sales coaching stuff. And he uses these tactics. Now, no one can argue that that guy doesn't make a lot of money. However, it's kind of like fast food versus slow food. Mm-hmm. Do you want to start another McDonald's even though you know that it's causing people to get sick every day? In other words, McDonald's makes money.
Yes. But
is that the only measure of what you should be contributing to the world?
No, and that's...
So maybe it's that. It's you could do this. You could sell people stuff they don't need by pressuring them into a sale, and it will probably work.
Yes. So
but what's the negative? What would you say? What's the negative? I don't want to put words in your mouth. What's the negative, repercussion for doing that? If you kettle people, because it does work. You can say that you have a fight, flight, or freeze, but of course it works.
Yes.
Yeah.
If your goal is money, then it absolutely can work.
Quick money.
My thing is that it's not, money should never be the goal.
All right. So now that's a wonderful, so people would say to you, I think that's what people would say. I think a point of view, not to put words in your mouth, is the purpose of sales is to increase revenue all the time.
Yeah.
And growth, constant growth.
But the purpose of sales, yes, from one side, it is constant growth from a monetary perspective. But when you define sales,
It doesn't have to be, by the way. That's
yeah,
one point. That's what I'm saying. I mean,
yeah,
you can say the contrarian statement might be that is not the purpose of
no,
sales.
sales is about getting money, but getting money in exchange for giving solutions.
Money is the fuel.
Absolutely.
It's a fair trade, but yeah, exactly.
But if
Yeah.
you are not providing those solutions, then you're a huckster.
So then let's say that that's one. Let's just, since we have limited time, let's say that's your contrarian statement is, you know what? Because you could come into a party and say, or guess what, guys? Revenue is not the aim of sales and growth is not the aim of sales. What? Of course it is. No, no, let me explain. Okay, so if that's the case, what is it for those of us in the audience who don't know the ins and outs of the life and times of Grant Cardone, who is your your boogeyman that you disagree with and you can pick a fight with? What is would he say that his goal is just to generate money? I mean, he probably tells you that the stuff he's selling is the greatest stuff on earth. So explain to us what you see about this man, because you probably know more about him than I do.
Yeah. My concern is the method. My concern
Well,
is
first give us background. Like, what's his shtick? Like, I don't even think everyone knows his
yes.
thing, you know?
So Grant Cardone is very, very heavy on closing, on overturning objectives. A lot of the old school style
And
process.
what does he sell? I mean, what is he? Like, what does
He's
he
got a
sell?
handful of different businesses. He does a lot with his sales coaching, his sales training, but he's also involved with a lot of real estate. He's very big on people taking out debt in order to fund their businesses.
Taking out debt to fund their
Taking out,
businesses.
yes,
Okay.
and leveraging that debt in order to make more and more money.
Which you would, I mean, in fairness, I'm always going to play the devil's advocate.
And that's what, yeah, that's what
That is the definition of capitalism, literally. Like, I mean, it went from being just merchants to capitalism when people could take $1 and turn it into five using debt. So what's so bad about that?
it's when things do fall apart, it's getting a lot of people and putting them in very bad places from a
Right.
debt.
So there are people who shouldn't be taking out debt and they're
Yes.
doing it too soon and they're doing it at the wrong time.
Now with
Because
that,
debt is important. I mean, you need
absolutely.
debt. I mean, if you need runway, yeah.
And like that's the difference between say a Grant Cardone and a Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey is completely against debt.
And I don't agree with that either. I mean, he says
No,
that
there's a balance.
you should never use credit cards. You should put stuff in envelopes. Really? Always?
No.
A line of credit in a business is always a bad thing?
Yeah.
Of course it's not.
But the degree that he worships that golden goose is the problem that I have.
All right, so talk about really give me the rundown of this guy before you, because just saying I'm against closing, there are other salespeople saying that. I mean, there's a company called Sales Evolution, which is actually a very good company. They're just a sales training company, not a media company like you. And their whole thing is guest free selling. They're against closing. So that's not, and Sandler does something like that. So I want to go a little deeper with you. I don't think that's what you're saying. I don't think it's just,
and
you're
it's
saying
not,
something else. It's revenue. It's tell me what you're really saying, you know?
okay. So it's a lot of the older school, like it's not just closing, it's how you overturn objections. Most of those tactics are about more creating arguments than they are just actually helping people.
But hold on, it's not enough to say older school because some old stuff is good. So I want to revisit the fundamentals. So let's go back to the negative idea. You said creating false scarcity in a close is not good. What is another point of view that you think that maybe isn't, necessarily the deal?
Like the NLP, everything I've looked into it, like the idea of getting people to say yes over and over and over again. That feels more like the kettling idea that I talked about before.
So here's an idea. I'm going to throw an idea at you. So I have a hype strategy called packaging, right?
Okay.
Your package. So there's a quote from propagandists and what are their names? Aronson. They're these partners who write about propaganda, big social scientists on the topic. And I may misquote this, but it's the essence of propaganda is a well-designed package. And what they mean by that is that our brains are designed not to see the world accurately, but to sift through all of the data that we have on a regular basis. Because if otherwise we'd be paralyzed and we'd get eaten. You know what I mean? So like you have to make quick decisions based on experience. So we look at packaging. So when Grant Cardone walks in wearing a really expensive watch, smoking a really expensive guitar, he shows his mansion, he makes a big stink that his wife is a beautiful model actress, which I'm not saying that, he says it, you know, and trots her around for that purpose, you know. That's smart.
Mhm.
Because he's saying essentially you're going to be this if you follow my stuff. However,
Yeah.
the packaging needs to be consistent with your message. So I'm looking at you right now, and you're wearing no jewelry. You're wearing a t-shirt.
Yeah.
However, you have tools behind you that cost money. You know, you have, I guess, a hobby of woodworking. That's what I'm assuming,
Yeah.
that you've invested a lot of money in because that's what you like to do. Do you have any other cool stuff that you've invested in just because you wanted to, that lets you live the way you want to live?
I mean, I've got, like, I'm literally looking table saw, bandsaw, router table,
Okay.
prop saw, the, like, all over the place. It's mostly tools, like, that's that kind of stuff.
So in the small amount of time we have together, here are the dots that I'm connecting. You don't not wear fancy jewelry because you couldn't. If you really wanted to go into debt and make more money, and you're a smart guy, you know how to sell, you could probably get an expensive watch if you want. And if you can't now, you'll be able to soon. You know what I mean? You could certainly wear a shirt more expensive than an athletic, you know, shirt. It looks perfectly fine, but if you wanted to wear the shiny button-down shirt with the button open at the top, you could certainly do that, the whole deal. However, you don't believe money is fuel. It's not for its own sake. And the purpose of sales is not to accumulate money like Scrooge McDuck so you could put it in a room and like count your gold coins and buy Ferraris. The purpose of sales is to make other people's lives better and be compensated for fair value so that you can live the life you want to live. And if you're tricking people by not letting them off the phone until they want to, by pretending there's scarcity where there's no scarcity, by doing the Tai Lopez thing and renting a mansion that you don't have the money to earn because you know that then people will pay you for nothing so you can actually buy the mansion, you are selling not to fuel your passions, not to fuel your life, not to get fairly compensated for the value you provide, but you're selling to be Scrooge McDuck, to accumulate money, and you will do anything it takes. And that hurts people and that hurts society, because if there's never enough, then you will do anything. And look at Grant Cardone. He is admitting that he's tricking people.
Yeah.
He says it.
Yeah.
And the reason he does it, he doesn't care about you. He cares about his watch.
Yes.
And what you're saying, so your attitude helps you. You're saying, look, man, it's not that I can't afford nice clothes. It's that I this is an artisanal type selling that I'm doing.
Mhm.
I am finding ways to present valuable information and valuable items in a way that they can understand and digest it and make an informed decision about it. I'm doing that at scale so that we go quickly through these people. When I get a quick no, it's so I don't waste their time, but I can get in front of people more efficiently to help them. And as a result, I can get the fuel to be me. I can invest in miter sols and this stuff and build with my hands. I'm that guy. I'm a salt of the earth guy who got so swept up in greed and the ability to close that I had a nervous breakdown, but I flipped sales on its head. And now sales is a tool that lets me be me and provide value all day long. And that's why I don't wear a piece of jewelry. You don't have to say that, except my wedding ring or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've spent $15 on this one.
Yeah. So I don't know. Then you're turning, because otherwise I'm looking at you and I'm saying, does this guy suck at sales? He doesn't have a fancy watch.
Yeah.
but that's not what it's about.
No. It's purpose-driven autonomy is the phrase that kind of ran through my mind as you were talking about things.
Purpose-driven autonomy, but you don't even have to use like that's like buzz terms. I mean, I think it's embodying. It's Andy Warhol didn't need to become the hyper heterosexual flinging paint on a canvas dude, because what he was saying was, listen, man, you know what he said when they asked him, why do you paint soup cans? I like soup. And people debated that for the next 25 years.
Yeah.
So, like, what I'm saying to you is, if you're obsessed, I would use Scrooge McDuck. If you're obsessed with being Scrooge McDuck and amassing all this stuff, you can't help it but sell people bullshit. Am I allowed to curse on this show?
Yeah.
You can't help it because you gotta fuel the habit.
Yeah.
Grant Cardone has to sell bullshit.
Yeah.
There's no way around it because his incentives are misaligned with yours.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of money to live how he's going to live.
Yeah.
I want to live well too.
Yeah.
But I want to be compensated for the value I provide. And that means moving through no's quickly. It means getting in front of the right people. It means pricing fairly for what it is. It means having a structured process. And I can build my workshop.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I can live the life. Do you really want, if you want Ferraris and watches, listen to Grant Cardone. I don't envy your life, but listen to him. But do you want to live the life you want to live? Listen to me.
And the idea that I'm also thinking of that I didn't get to mention with closing is all the people that I've closed in my sales career, all the people that I've gotten and like did all those tactics, I hated working with.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. I mean, I will tell you, a lot of these people. So Gary Vaynerchuk's Wine Library TV was pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
He is now like a full-time internet guru, and how he ostensibly makes his living, 300-person company, is he has an advertising agency, a digital advertising agency. And I'm not saying their work isn't good. What I will say is I'm in that world, and I've asked, no one has ever been able to point to a campaign they've done that has actually like you can point to like Crispin Porter Bogowski, and they've done all the Truth cigarette anti-smoking campaign. Yeah. No one has yet been able to point to a campaign. So what that tells me is Gary is the best at marketing Gary. And as a result, all of the brands who come to him, they want a piece of that Gary thing, but they can't really get it because it's about the cult of personality. So if you notice, Gary's biggest fans, the Vayniacs, are around 21 years old, and they're usually half broke people who are trying to become quote unquote entrepreneurs. And when you're that young, I don't know. Young people are great, but I'll tell you, I needed money, and my friend convinced me to do multi-level marketing, and he had been tricked by the same people that, so I mean, at that point you want a guru, and Gary's played on that. Grant Cardone, and again, they may have done awesome ad campaigns that I don't know about, but I just haven't heard of them, Grant Cardone is the same thing. I mean, you never hear people talking about Grant Cardone, how the stuff he actually sells is good. Never. You hear about what a good salesman he is, and how his young and his fans are all young too.
Yes.
What is he selling? And so they burn people, like to your point about not liking to work with the people. If you go on Glassdoor, their turnover at VaynerMedia is insane. Like they burn people out like crazy, And
it goes back to that hustle culture all over again.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, there's a place for that. I'm not saying these are bad people. In fact, I've been very complimentary to Vaynerchuk, and maybe Cardone sells great stuff. I don't know. You never hear about it, but I know that that's not you. And there are millions of people who don't want that. They want to sell, not so they can be salesmen. They want to fund their lives and provide value and be happy to go to work every day.
And especially with people who want to build their own business.
100%.
Are the technicians who, I think of Michael Gerber and the E-Myth Revisited, the people who are the baker, like Sarah, who knows how to make the pie but doesn't know how to sell it. That's where the people I really want to help.
And, the one problem with the E-Myth, and I love that framework, I think it's a great framework. At the same time, he uses McDonald's as an example, and McDonald's is an awesome business as a business, but maybe Sarah shouldn't be McDonald's. There's a place for the baker,
Absolutely.
but they need to sell their bread. If
Yeah.
they can't sell, they don't, in other words, not every, I mean, McDonald's is a multi-billion dollar, I mean, they have more employees than some countries have people, you know, I mean, that's not, it's not even a, I mean, McDonald's could field an army
Yeah.
if they wanted to. If they needed to overthrow a company to get a potato supply, they could literally field an army. That's not a business. That's an empire, you know? So, but a lot of times people just want to, you know, Sarah, she wants to get up, make a decent living selling bread. But sometimes if you don't know how to sell, you can't even do that. You go out of business.
Yes. But that's part
And
of
that's what
the
you need
issue
to
that
appeal
I'm
to.
having is you don't need to be a multi-billionaire. You can,
But that's you. You're a guy who wears an athletic shirt, but who has the money to fund his
hobbies.
hobbies, and who build, literally, it's like a metaphor. Like, it's so perfect. You build with your hands.
Yeah.
It's such an awesome, just like Gary could say, listen, wine doesn't have to be for snobs. It tastes like Skittles. You're saying Grant Cardone hasn't created a thing in his life. He sells wisps and dreams. I'm a man who builds with my hands. You don't have to say it. Show it.
Yeah, you
It's
could.
tangible. It's tangible sales. It's workmanship. I have a craftsman's mentality.
Yeah. So that's really where I want to go with all of this.
And you could write articles. I mean, you could listen, you know, I mean, you can if you want, but it's already been done by me. But why Grant Cardone is flat out wrong. But you know, that's the idea. It's
and he was just,
I mean, here's an article. No, here's an article. I don't know the headline, but an article that's like, does a $30,000 watch really signify success?
Yeah.
And you're basically saying, without calling them suckers, all you suckers out there are being sucked in by this heuristic of a $30,000 watch. These people know exactly where they have you. This is not by accident.
I'm even against the idea that the clothes make the man. I'm against the idea of wearing suits in general. If my job as a salesperson is to get people to trust me, so why would I dress up like a politician?
However, you know, I come back to music a lot because I like music. And I think the reason I like rock and roll a lot is because it's always been as much theater as it has been music. I mean, you know, you can go see like a reggae. I saw the Scotalites, you know, and these guys were like 88 years old wearing like mesh caps and like fisherman boots. And they don't care how they dress. They're like up there, you know, playing music, you know. But rock and roll's always been about theater. So like you had the grunge movement in the 90s. And the whole conceit of that movement was that, you know, we just came off these years of hair metal and glam rock and we're down to earth and this and that. But it was the right kind of down to earth. They didn't just wear whatever they found. It was Doc Martens and it was cardigans and flannels and you showed your roots when you bleached your hair. You know what I'm saying? So like, and I think if you want to hype this stuff, while you may not think the clothes make the man, you've got to be conscious about your casualness.
Yes.
In other words, the fact that you have a big bushy beard helps.
Yes.
Because I can imagine you swinging that axe.
Yeah.
If you just had like a button, like some people, like what not dressing right means is that they just wear khakis, pleated khakis and whatever, and a shirt, and they have straight hair. Nothing wrong with that. It's just because it's easiest.
Yeah.
But you sort of do have a look.
Yeah. No, it's jeans and a plain colored t-shirt.
Right, but also the beard.
One of the fanciest things I own. Because
I know, but I think you've got to don't come in with a button-up shirt just because that's what was clean that day. If you're going to be the casual workman guy, be the workman guy. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't get rid of that beard because you're sick of the beard. In other words, clothes does make the man, but it's not that you wear a suit because everyone's wearing a suit. It's got to convey your point of view, and your point of view is craftsman-like selling. It's lifestyle selling. It's this thing we talked about, and that's important. You've got to embody that.
Yeah.
Fortunately, you already do.
Minimalism.
Yeah, minimal. But don't use that because that's being used anywhere. I like the craftsman metaphor. I like the money is fuel metaphor. I like the idea that this stuff's important, but if you're incentivized by the wrong things, you're going to do manipulative selling. And if you want that, there are people who teach that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love that.
But guess what? How many of Grant Cardone's fans have $30,000 watches? If he's so good, what percentage of his people who buy his product own $30,000 watches?
Yeah.
I bet it's less than 0.5%.
That's probably a safe assumption.
I bet it's less than 0.25%. I mean, like 0.25%. Like Tony Robbins fills arenas. These people aren't rich.
No.
He's rich.
Yeah. And that's not what I want. I don't necessarily want to sell becoming rich. I want to sell becoming happy.
But you can say that. It's like, listen, if you want the Ferraris, you should go for those guys. But ask yourself this. How many of those people, and then ask what I just asked. You know what I mean? Ask.
Yeah.
Don't say it. You don't know. Ask the question.
And let them answer it for themselves in their own head. That's perfect. But I've loved this conversation. I know you have to get going.
I've loved it too.
Yeah.
I hope it helped.
Yeah. And this has been, it's always fun being able to take something apart to me. Like, I know that you can guess that, but for me, it's always fun taking something apart and seeing how it all works. And I haven't done it to the full degree that I thought I had. And that's
the good news is I think you're onto something. In other words, I mean, you're already doing well, right? But I mean, I think the pieces for something special are here. I think there's a coherent story, and you've started to scratch the surface. But I think if you throw away some of these, even get better at throwing away the lingo and just talk about talk in that down to earth way that you do so well.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole market out there who wants to learn sales, who doesn't want to be Grant Cardone. That's their nightmare.
Yeah. And it was a nightmare I lived and crushed me.
Right.
Quite frankly.
And I think that's an amazing story. And you do that well. You tell that story very, very well.
Yeah. So I know you have to get running. The book is out tomorrow. The Hype Handbook, 12 Indispensable Success Secrets from Around the World, from the world's greatest propagandists, self-promoters, cult leaders, mischief makers, boundary breakers. Michael, tell them where they could find it.
You know, we're still doing the pandemic thing, unfortunately. So your best bet is on the internet. So Amazon's great, Barnes and Noble. But yeah, if you can pop into a bookstore and they have it, that's always great too.
Awesome. I absolutely loved it. I have to, like, the stories were just like, oh, I could try that. Like, I really enjoyed the book.
That means a lot.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being on. Thank you so much for taking the time to take apart my business. I want to do this again. I'm going to start putting these things into practice, and then I'm going to write a review for your book based on these things too.
Oh, that's I can't wait to see that. That's so much fun.
So once again, everybody who's listening, thank you so much for taking the time. Please subscribe, please like, please review. And until next time, go fix yourself.